candidates for coming today. Really appreciate them spending their time doing this. The ground rule that we're going to work with is that each candidate will be given 5 minutes to talk about themselves, and we've asked them to address what they consider to be the 3 leading issues for this House district and for the state, and how they would address those issues. After each of the candidates gets done speaking, we will then open it up for questions from the floor. We understand that we have people in here who still work and need to be out of here at 1 o'clock. So please just go ahead and leave if you want to. The candidates have been informed that. They know that's not going to be an unwritten statement about them. We would like to be out of here by 1:30. Ask your questions. I've asked the candidates to answer them directly and be done with it in 2 minutes. I will be the timekeeper. If I'm doing this or stand up and doing this, it's probably time to quit talking.
Or his ears hurt.
What's that?
Or your ears hurt.
Or my ears hurt. One of the two. I could be up to that. So we've drawn cards as to who's going to be the first speaker.
Eileen. Yes, thank
There you go. And that microphone is on, I think, so if you need it.
Check.
Yep.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
I guess I'll use it then.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. My name is Eileen Kiely. It's spelled K-I-E-L-Y. It's driving Dick Keen crazy. It's Irish, not German. It also drove my German bosses crazy. But I am the 5th of 6 children in an Irish Catholic family. So growing up, I learned 2 things really quick. We had plenty of opportunity to figure out what was fair. Lots of scarce resources to be allocated. We also had plenty of opportunity to learn to speak up. Because if you didn't speak up, then you couldn't get to what was fair. As I got older, I thought about things that maybe weren't just fair for me, but part of my faith and my family values. Brought up things that were fair for my friends, for my workmates. And so I have had a career of looking for ways to make things more fair and to speak up for people that have a hard time speaking up for themselves. So I am a mom. I'm a Navy veteran. I was a Navy officer. So Eric, welcome to the family. Wrong branch, but it's okay. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. And most importantly for this run, I'm retired from Daimler Trucks North America, where I was a financial controller. I managed billion-dollar budgets. I also managed global supply chain. And I managed pricing decisions for some of our brands. So in my career, I worked very hard to be fair and to speak up. Because that's really a controller's job. I am not an accountant. An accountant's job is to keep track of debits and credits and make sure they equal 0. Accounting always has a right answer and it's 0. But controlling, the right answer is going to depend on what our goals are. Because a budget is a statement of your organization's values. And our state budget is a statement of who we are as Oregonians. So as a controller, my job was to work with managers and say, we have enough money to do this. We can go and we can take care of this. You're not meeting this goal here. And how do we look at all of our finances so that we're accomplishing what are really the goals of our group? And this is something that I would like to bring to the state legislature. And in fact, it's probably my #1 priority. I know you're not used to hearing a Democrat talk about money. And I will admit that I'm a capitalist. But I also know that there is a fairness and there is, more than anything else, transparency that's needed in order to be fair with your budgets and to be fair with how you're meeting those, how you're meeting those goals. So there is still that opportunity. And there's still a need to speak up. And partly in my job, I was also there to speak up to managers. not to toe the line, not to do as I was told, but really to stick to the truth and what was important for our overall goals. Sometimes I got in trouble for that. But I also found out, because my parents had taught me this before, that when you stand up for what's right and when you speak for your values, you may experience some short-term discomfort. But in the long run, you are still you. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. Are you standing up for your values? And I always try to do that. So another value that I really want to stand up for, and I believe this in my heart, is that healthcare is a fundamental right. Thank you. I learned this from my daughter when she was 2.5, and she listened to a news report about healthcare. And from the back seat, as I was driving her into daycare, I heard her pipe up and say, "Mom, they were talking about going to the doctor, weren't they?" And I said, "Yes, honey, they were." And she said, "Shouldn't everybody get to see a doctor when they're sick?" And I said, "Yes, honey, they should." And my daughter today is a nurse. She's a nurse at Duke Hospital in North Carolina. And that's a value that I actually learned from my child, and I have brought forward. So one of the things that affects us very much in Central Oregon is we're very low in terms of employer coverage here. We're about 10 points below the national average. So as a result, 22% of our neighbors are paying for their own health care out of their pocket, and 14% are foregoing health care entirely. Am I done, or do I have one more minute? He says I'm done. So I'm going to quickly say this, and then I'll skip my third value. We can get it in a question. So what I would like to see, because our choices are so poor here, we're down to 3 companies and just a gold, bronze, and silver plan. I would like to give Oregonians the opportunity to buy into the Oregon Health Plan based on their income, because we have so many of our neighbors that are really squeezed, and I'd like them to have another option. So I look forward to the rest of your questions, and hopefully we'll talk about more priorities. Thanks, Earl.
Thank you. Hey, Nate, when I put my hand up, you'll have 15 seconds, okay? Thank you.
Well, hello everybody, and thank you for the invitation to be with you. I'm Bill Trimble, and I'm going to suggest that one of the big differences you're going to see among the candidates today is a depth of experience. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk to you about some of the issues I think are important. So I'm a Vietnam combat veteran. I've spent 6 years in the nuclear submarine force. When I got out of the service, I went back to school, and that led to a PhD in medical physiology. I then did 4 years of postdoctoral research training in molecular biology, and that led to a 40-year career in science and research and teaching. And while I was teaching at the University of Idaho, I started a small company called Idaho Immunodiagnostics. I was president and CEO of that company for a number of years until I left Idaho. And so I have appreciation for small business. I have an appreciation for the difficulty in growing a small business and for paying payroll. Now, I left Idaho to go into university administration, and I became a dean of the College of Life Sciences and Agriculture in New Hampshire and the director of the state agricultural experiment station. In New Hampshire, I was appointed to the State Conservation Commission, and I was appointed to the State Land Board. Now, in that capacity, I wrote and reviewed legislation for the state. I was also elected to be chair of a 9-state agricultural experiment station section. And in that capacity, I wrote legislation for the Farm Bill. So I have a depth of experience in this area. I think I can hit Salem running, and I have an experience there that I think most of the other candidates can't say. So I went on to become second in command at a couple of universities. I was in the state university system of New York at the Canton campus as their provost and vice president for academic affairs, and I retired as a senior vice president at a college in Maine, Unity College. Now, everywhere I've lived, I have considered it important to be in community service. And that's something we can talk about, but I wanted to save some time to talk to you about issues that are important to me. And the first one is healthcare. I am a huge supporter of healthcare for all. One of the first things I would do would be to reintroduce the bill that didn't make it through the short session last year to make healthcare a right, not a privilege. And then we would pursue healthcare for all following the format set out by a group called Healthcare for Oregon. They've done an analysis that shows you can now do healthcare for all, implement it at no more cost than the state and the government are now spending in Oregon. Okay, so then let's move on to education. There are a number of things I'd like to do in education. Please ask about these. I have a proposal for allowing teachers to have the flexibility to use methods that validate student learning before moving on to other information, adding new information. I want to write the legislation to change the assessment process for the state of Oregon K through 12 by not using constant quantitative testing, which hasn't worked for us for years, but using a peer-reviewed process that comes from higher education has been shown to work well. I'd like to cap class sizes, and I have a proposal to solve the PERS legacy debt in 20 years by raising the by-the-glass assessment or tax on by-the-glass beer and wine sales from the lowest in the nation only to halfway up to the national average. That'll bring in $750 million a year, and in 20 years we would have no, thank you, we'd have no debt. Okay, in the economy, if we solve PERS, we lift all anchors. I'm for an economic enterprise zone to help small business and a $15 minimum wage. So I will quit. My time is up. Thank you very much, and look forward to your questions. Yeah?
Hi, my name is Jack Zika. I'm running for state representative. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you at the Kiwanis. You guys do a lot of volunteering and raise a lot of money for the community. And I too volunteer for the community. I volunteer for the Redmond Planning Commission. I volunteer for the Neighborhood Revitalization Committee and the US 97 South Corridor Committee. I also serve meals at Bethlehem Inn, and I helped build houses for Habitat for Humanity. And I donate a lot of food to the Ronald McDonald House. And we actually have a connection with the Kiwanis. My daughter, who's been running around causing a ruckus back there, she was born 2 months early, premature, and the Ronald McDonald House let us stay there for a month because she was at St. Charles and we needed to be by her side while she was in the oscillate. She was 3 pounds. And the Kiwanis came in every Thursday and built and made supper for us. So, and we really appreciated that, and we wanted to take the chance to say thank you very much. But I also have another child, a 7-year-old Lucas, and he's in school right now. And it's one of the main reasons why I decided to run for my children and our future, all of our future. And I think important issues are their education, housing in the future, so they were able to afford housing here. And I think we have a spending problem in our government. With education, we're 47th in graduation rate. That's just awful. 2 years in a row, that's awful. And then the last student teacher or parent-teacher conference I went to, I found out we were 50th in science. So last place is pretty darn bad. But I think we can do better. I think we can do better. And the elephant in the room is PERS. So PERS, we need PERS reform. We need to change the system. We need to move it to a 401k corporate structure. Stop the bleeding. Affordable housing can be fixed, guys. We can do that here. We can make housing affordable, and the way we do that is with land use. If we had more control of our land use, we could have a better say on how we grow instead of Salem saying how we should grow. Bend's UGB process, their expansion, cost them over $1 million, took a few years, and then that would have been better spent in their infrastructure. So if we had a say of how we would expand the UGB, we could use that money in a lot better way. Side note on land use is we have a problem here in Redmond, just outside. It's a homeless camp. And they wanted to take care of that homeless camp and move it, and we actually had a citizen that wanted to donate land where we could have the homeless camp on there. But the land use law said that was not a proper zoning, so we couldn't do that. So if we had more control of our zoning, we could have solved that problem, or at least help these people. That it's a public safety issue. There's crime going on out there. There's arson, there's rape, there's drugs. It's a bad thing. And the police department, I went on a ride along, they said they've lost 2 cars going over there trying to do these calls because the terrain is so rough. So this is a big issue with local control. Also, for affordable housing, going back to that, we are subcontractors. We have a real issue when it comes to plumbers, electricians, carpenters, framers, to get that stuff together, and the costs for these services have doubled since the recession. And it's just because there aren't as many workers, and it's time consuming, and we just can't find the workers. So I want to partner up with COCC and create a trade school for plumbers, electricians, and carpenters, and then we would be able to recruit our own, and these are good paying jobs, and it would help the economy. So, and then the third way we can do affordable housing is blocking any kind of tax or regulation that hurts the housing. I mean, every year we're defending our mortgage interest tax deduction, and also they want to reform our property taxes, which we all know is code for raising our property taxes. What was I at? Education, housing, spending. So we have wasteful spending going on right now. We have $200 million they spend on Cover Oregon, $200 million over budget on Highway 20, $100 million in Medicaid. You know, these are just issues. Phones were $70 million. The voice-operated phones that just didn't work. So these are issues that we need to get fixed. We need to hold the department heads accountable, pull them in front of committee, find out why we're losing this money, and then not fund these programs. That's what we need to do for wasteful spending. My name is Jack Zika. I'm running for state representative. I really appreciate being here, guys. Thank you very much.
And our next speaker is Ben, excuse me.
Good afternoon, I'm Ben Schimmoller. I'm candidate for state representative. As you can see, I'm a little younger than maybe some candidates that you might perceive as someone interested in running for government. But I think that's a reflection of my experience growing up here in Central Oregon and the issues that we face here and the problems that I've seen growing up and how we can change them and how these issues are going to affect not only your generation, but my generation and the next generation. So I grew up here locally. I was raised in Tumalo, graduated from Mountain View High School, went off and attended Oregon State University, graduated from there, came back here, and actually was hired as Phil Henderson's campaign manager for county commissioner, and we won that race, and now County Commissioner Henderson is doing good work for us at the county, lowering property taxes and demanding more fiscal accountability and responsibility there. At Oregon State, I got into politics after I injured my neck and back and wasn't able to earn a commission in ROTC for the Marine Corps, and really developed a passion for finding a way to serve and be connected to the community. I've served the community in other ways as well, joining my local Knights of Columbus organization through St. Francis Catholic School and church. We do a lot of outreach and a lot of charity work, and we stay connected to the community in that way. I've done some work personally with Central Oregon Veterans Outreach. I'm very focused on the veterans issues and the questions facing our community there, whether it's homelessness, small business issues, or mental illness. And I think that these are issues that really can connect and be expanded in a broad way to the questions facing Central Oregon. I find that Oregon has really become a state not friendly to small businesses. Kate Brown signed Senate Bill 1528, which removed what would essentially be a 30% tax break on our small businesses. And instead of creating an opportunity that could lead to growth, new jobs, an opportunity to reinvest, they decided that the state deserved that money more. And I just don't subscribe to that attitude. And so I think that that money would be better served locally in our communities and better locally serving our local businesses. The other side is I want to see veterans helped more. Considering 22 veterans kill themselves a day and how high our veteran population is here, we can be doing more to help the mental health issues around veterans and all of us, the homeless issues surrounding veterans and all of us, and see more engagement and push that our federal legislators do more to help veterans have better access to quality VA care. It's no secret that the VA has really, at the very least, dropped the ball in terms of their responsibility and services to those who have served us. Another side of the issue for me is indeed spending, and I think it really connects to PERS. PERS connects to so many issues facing our state, whether through its $22 billion deficit. It reflects poorly in our education because dollars are no longer going to classrooms, and this is very personal for me because my wife and my mother are teachers, and they really, at the end of the day, face problems in their classroom with the resources available to them. I would like to see a tax break opportunity for any penny at the state level that a teacher spends in their classroom, but there has to be more there has to be more we can do, and we can't just keep plugging holes. We really need to fix the question. And so I think it will take a 401k model, it will take a salary cap, and I think that work that Representative Wisna has done by trying to reduce what can be defined as income to calculate PERS is a step in the right direction. But I really would encourage everyone to take a look at the Knope-Johnson plan for PERS reform, and I think that's a great place to start, and I would work to implement that on the House side. And I really think that this is a reasonable approach considering it's gotten bipartisan support in the Senate. This is something we need to see happen in the State House. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm Ben Schimmoller. I hope to earn your vote if you're a Republican on May 15th and maybe write in if you're an independent. And thanks so much for your time. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you all the candidates for what they had to say to us. At this time, I would like to open up the floor. And what I'd ask is if you ask a question, perhaps all four candidates ought to try to address that question as against a particular one. There are lots of great issues that face our state. So are there any questions anybody'd like to ask? Dick?
First of all, as a retired family physician and having been in the industry for 6 decades, we all recognize that our healthcare system has been broken for a long time, and at least 3 of the 4 have mentioned healthcare as a primary interest and want to consider it a right, not a privilege. I have 2 questions in that regard. How do you get the public to accept the fact that healthcare is in fact a right, not a privilege? And 2, how do you separate responsibility for providing health care from the monetary factors?
Let's answer that as the way we step forward. We'll start that, and then we will come back. The second question will go just the opposite way.
The mic.
Oh. The mental health question.
You're free.
Dick, we already do accept it as a right because we don't allow people to be turned away at the emergency room. So right now, we are providing that right, but we're delivering it in the most expensive way possible. So by allowing coverage, and one of the things that, we think that you're only on the ACA if you have a marketplace plan, but actually the ACA set a floor, and that floor included a lot of preventative coverage. So when premiums went up for many people or many companies, it's because they went from very low coverage care to higher coverage, which included preventative coverage, which is the best thing that we can do in order to control our costs going forward, is to get people in for preventative care. So they have a relationship with a healthcare provider who actually knows them and will keep track of what they've done. I don't know if any of you have ever been on Kaiser, but it's an incredible model. You go into Kaiser and you will hear from everyone in that organization about what you need to do in order to maintain your health. The other side of that is we do not have a real, I don't want to step on your toes here.
Oh, go
But
ahead.
standard of care,
We do it all the time.
standard of care is part of the problem as well. We saw this in the opioid crisis, and we're actually making progress in it in Oregon more than a lot of other states. But there was a standard of care that was pushed out into the medical industry that said, opioids aren't addictive, we should use them long-term, and that has ended up costing us millions of dollars. So how do we more effectively talk about a standard of care and get it out into the industry so that when we're prescribing treatment, it's, first of all, is it gonna make the patient feel better? And secondly, is it gonna help the patient live longer? And if the answer to those questions is no, we probably shouldn't be providing that care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill?
Thank you. Healthcare is huge, and it involves and impacts huge areas of what happens in this state. So I think that Eileen is right. We do begin to look at healthcare as a right. We just haven't put it into legislation that codifies that. Now the other thing is, I believe we can go to healthcare for all. I think that, yes, it changes things, but it changes it in a big way. You're thinking outside of the box. You eliminate the negotiations between employers and employees now for healthcare. That's huge. It changes the whole lay of the land going forward. I told you I think it can be done at no increased expense than what we are already paying from the state and the government, but that comes with big changes. You have to be willing to negotiate for drug costs. You have to be willing to eliminate insurance companies from healthcare. You have to be willing to remove the middleman who negotiates between hospitals and pharmaceutical makers. So I think it's terrific, and I think we are seeing that people accept this. They accept the idea of healthcare for all because we saw an inability to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And so until such time as we actually can implement a health care for all, I think you have to continue to provide subsidies to the Affordable Care Act, because we have 95% of our people in Oregon on health care now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah?
So I'm going to have a typical Republican answer here. I believe in a free market system. So I believe that we don't need to get rid of insurance companies. I think we can bargain better, and I think we need to open our borders if we had more competition and keep the costs down. But I think that's more of a federal level. But Bill is right. We do need to get our hospitals together so they can negotiate prescription drug costs. So right now they're not doing it. All of them are buying their own drugs, and so if they were to get together and buy in a lump sum, they could save a lot of money, thus saving everybody else money. So I think we need to have programs like that, and just kind of a mixture of. I really think the government does a bad job when they get involved with institutions like this, like the VA medical, where they're reliant. So I really think this is more of a free market situation. We need to open it up.
Thank you. Ben?
So I also adopt the attitude that a free market system's better. The reason why the legislature did not vote to confirm healthcare as a right for Oregon is because that opens up the state a huge financial burden that the state is not in a position to deal with. It's all good to create legislation that makes us feel good about ourselves and pats ourselves on the back, but we need to think about the real world applications. If the state is already facing a $22 billion PERS deficit, if we incorporate a huge fiscal responsibility, a constitutional obligation to provide health care to people, and the state doesn't have any money, how on earth will the state be able to provide its other functions to people? It's already not able to provide other functions such as good infrastructure, proper care for our veterans, support for small business, etc. So adding a huge level of responsibility, both constitutionally and financially, is not how we're going to solve the problem facing us today with the medical question. I'm definitely not of the opinion that our state's track record with getting involved with medical issues is strong. 75 million overpaid in Medicaid and $250 million website that didn't work for health exchange. You know, we've struck out here, and the free market's the right idea. I definitely would support and encourage hospitals getting together to bargain for better services. And we need to create better incentives to increase the amount of employees available. We need more nurses, we need more doctors, and finding a system that rewards the small businesses that open up. Your care is a good, excuse me, great example of that. Really will create some competition and drive down costs and increase access for sure. So that's where I approach healthcare.
Next question, Ann.
Yes. So I've listened to Gene Wisnett talk many times, and one of his biggest frustrations and some of the other state representatives is that the two parties don't work together across the aisle. And I wonder if each of you could speak to your willingness to do that rather than just follow the lead of your party caucus.
Then we'll start with you. The next question, then we'll start with Bill, so that everybody gets a chance to be first.
So I've run a very partisan campaign. I have no problem standing up for these issues that I won't compromise on. And a couple of them are the Second Amendment and pro-life questions. That being said, Republicans are in the minority, and it doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon. And the questions that are facing our state are really nonpartisan questions that have to be solved tomorrow and will bring people together. PERS is a great example of this. And like I've said, I support the most widely recognized bipartisan support plan to try and fix PERS. And I really think that if someone who has run a partisan campaign and is not afraid to stand up and be very partisan is willing to come to the table and deal, that's going to create a new attitude and tone. You know, at the end of the day, Republican or Democrat, we're Oregonians. We want a better Oregon. We don't know necessarily how we always are going to agree on those issues, but we can agree on a lot of issues that aren't working. So I really think that if a partisan person does come approaching the table asking, okay, well, what are the things we can agree on? Let's work on those first. It'll create good karma and a trust with one another, and that might bridge the partisan divide a little bit and create more of a respect and understanding. We say, well, these are my issues I can't budge on. That might really help us, and I think create some better attitudes and ways we can solve the issues facing our state.
Thank you.
So Ann, I had a couple meetings with Gene, and he said the same thing. He said that if you don't have a Democrat that co-sponsor your bill, it's going to go nowhere. So that would be my mission day one, would be to go over there and shake some hands and meet some people and make some friends over there, because you want to compromise and you want to get things done that are better for the state. So that would be my plan, to go over there and meet some people and shake hands and make sure that we're together on things and we can get things done.
Now, I think I forced one of these on everyone coming in. If you look on the back, one of the issues that is listed there says returning civility and truth to politics. It's one of the key issues that I have identified and I think is really important. Now, you don't get the best answers or the best decisions if you don't get all of the information. And so if you can't talk to both sides, then you've eliminated your best chance of getting to the best decision. Now, I don't paint all Republicans with the same brush, and I will hope that Republicans don't paint all Democrats with the same brush. If you get a room full of Democrats, it's like going to the Unitarian church. Everybody wants to talk about everything, and you can never agree. But I think Jack was right. The way you do this is you make an effort in Salem to meet people and to build a consensus. Thank you.
My last job at Daimler was managing $500 million in contracting every year. And two of my largest suppliers had never entered into a long-term agreement with my company before. It was my responsibility to deliver certain issues for my company. It was their responsibility not to give it to me. It took years for us to literally negotiate that contract. And that meant sitting down every day across the table from somebody who didn't agree with me. And what it took is that eventually we had to become partners in it. I had to accept that point of view was different and that point of view is valid. It might not be my point of view, but it's valid in this agreement, and I need to honor that. And so we have those agreements. They've been lasting for the 3 years since we finished them. The interesting thing is that some of those people that were on the other side are now my campaign donors. So they may not agree with everything that I say, but they support me, and they know that I'm going to go for the best possible deal that I can get, because the people of Oregon are not a real estate transaction that we can just buy another house. They are our deal, and we cannot walk away from them, which means we can't walk away from our colleagues.
Thank you. Okay, it'll be Bill, Ben, Jack, and Eileen. For the next question, who has the next question? Gary.
I had the opportunity to run for House District 59 against John Huffman in 2012. And because of the system we have, I registered as a Democrat when I prefer to be registered as a non-affiliated. But the thing that shocked me when I was learning about the process was the amount of paperwork I received from different organizations asking me my opinion. The thickest one was the one from the state unions, on unions and what they could expect out of me. I didn't fill any of them out except for NRA, because I used to have a federal firearms license. They didn't even give me any money because I was a Democrat. What can be done to keep the big bucks out of politics, especially in Oregon? Because it's disgusting.
Well, I am learning as you about all the paperwork and making decisions on which endorsements I would like to pursue and those that are unlikely to help me. Your question was, how do you keep money out of politics? I think we have way too much money in politics, and we need to look at ways to do that. At the global level, you repeal Citizens United and don't call money free speech. What I would like to propose in Salem is that if it is an Oregon law, that it is financed by Oregon money and only Oregon money. And that means that when you run, if there is an issue or a law that is affecting only us, then you allow only Oregon donors and Oregon businesses to finance that particular law or effort.
Thank you. Ben?
So one thing that's actually coming down the pipeline right now is Janus versus Association, I'm trying to remember the long acronym, AAC. Essentially, it's an association of public unions, different scales. And so that would be, because unions overwhelmingly are the public big money in Oregon politics. So that would be one example if Janus goes the way that it seems likely, given Justice Kennedy, who is usually the flip vote, line of questioning went. But we probably won't know that till June, maybe July. So in bigger scale of requests, that's a tricky one. I'll admit that I am very hesitant to create regulation on types of how campaigns can be contributed to. I think that there is really big, deep speech questions, and I would not want to wade into any legislation that potentially could limit financial contributions until Citizens United was overturned at a higher level. Mostly because I think that there's too much room for abuse at the lower levels, because who decides what's big money? And is it scaled to certain races? And does it scale to certain partisan, nonpartisan races? So I think it's a deeper, complex question, and I think that the biggest issue comes from you have to respect the First Amendment, and that sometimes creates situations that we don't like in politics, for sure.
Well, I do think it is part of the First Amendment rights. A lot of these groups that give out money are bigger groups, like the farmers, loggers. They come together and they pull their money, and they interview candidates, and they make sure that they give the money to the candidates that they think will support them and support their the way they work and do business. And so this is a right that these businesses have, and individuals have the same right to give out as much money as they want to as well. Now, I think there is a discussion of maybe a cap that you could put on it, so it wasn't outrageous. But other than that, I believe it's a First Amendment right.
There's a federal cap on individuals of $2,700. We don't have that in Oregon. In Oregon, we have unlimited spending. I think that the first step is transparency, and I'd invite you all, we actually do have a tool for transparency. It's our OR-STAR system. So you can look up every candidate. You can look up every candidate and find out who their major donors are. And I think, I don't know if you've seen the name of, Congress people with labels all over them for who their sponsors are. We have a right to know who are giving money and who our candidates are being supported by. At this point, all of my donors are individual donors. I've received endorsements, but not money. If you're going to limit, for example, unions or a local PAC, then how does that relate to also corporate donations? Because we understand that Citizen United says that corporations can give as much money as they want. So if they have that market power, then how do you limit other groups that get together with their market power to donate? It's not an easy solution. And I do think that the first step is transparency and for us to educate ourselves about that. I think it's Jefferson's that says the educated citizenry is necessary to the survival of a free society. So that is step one. And I encourage you to please check all of us out, take a look at the money, look at our stances, see how they work together.
Another question. Well, I have one for you.
Okay.
All of you drove today to get here. You drove on a road. Would you tell me what you would do to make sure that our transportation and infrastructure in this state is properly funded and that we are able to move forward into at least the 21st century as we hobble out of the 20th? And I'm going to start with Jack, and then we'll go to Eileen and Bill.
Well, our infrastructure is very important and it's failing, so we need to prioritize that into the budget, and we need to make sure ODOT has the resources that they have necessary to do the job. We need to fix our roads, we need to fix our bridges, and in cities even. We need to expand, we need to grow, we need to build our infrastructure, so we need to make sure that it's prioritized in the budget and make sure that the cities and counties get resources that they need to.
Thank you.
Okay, so I already admitted I'm a capitalist. I also took economics, and we know that in economics there are things that are not taken care of by the free market. We call them social goods and social costs, and roads are one of those things. So government's responsibility is to provide the infrastructure that grows our economy. That's roads, that's bridges, it's also education, it's the human capital. So if we are going to provide this for business to prosper, we have a right to expect business to help pay for that. Currently in Oregon, we collect 11 times as much in individual taxes as we do in corporate taxes. I don't think that we quite have the right math there. And I say this as a corporate controller who had to make pricing decisions and had to make developments, siting decisions based on current information, and that did not include taxes. We did not include taxes in our day-to-day decision making. So our tax structure is out of whack. It does need some reform, and we're not going to be able to be the Oregon that we love, and we aren't going to be able to support our businesses unless we're also properly funding them.
Well, I drove here in a 1960 Austin Healey Bug-Eye, so we're pretty light on the road, and it doesn't cause many potholes. But we do have a problem. And one way that you begin to address this problem is to solve other problems. I've presented a mechanism to solve the PERS legacy debt, $25 billion in 20 years. Then you can lift the anchor off of Oregon and you can spend your money that you should be using in other ways as it's necessary. I'd introduce a bill for an idling law that says after you have idled your car for 3 minutes, you have to turn it off. And if you don't, you get a fine. And then that money goes towards highways. The other thing that I think we need to do is look at growth, of course. And one way that we can have more influence in what we do here is to change the 50-year-old Senate Bill 100 that set urban growth boundaries and allowed exclusive farm units and forest zones. Change that so that there are 6 districts throughout this state, so that those districts have an influence on how you do land planning and road planning in your area. We're different than the valley. And last, Eileen told you that individuals pay 11 times more than corporations. Corporations should then pay their fair share. And I would reintroduce a Measure 97-like bill that suggests that those corporations making over 25 million pay a little more.
Thank you.
So this may sound like a broken record for me, but PERS is a serious issue that trickles down into the lower levels and prevents them from being able to address their financial responsibilities. The north end of Bend, the entrance to Highway 20, is a great example of that. There's been a long time of Bend looking for a business that will come in, update the infrastructure in the corner, build a roundabout, and every time a business comes in and is excited about that property, they get slapped with the bill of what they think the cost will be, and they turn around, wave, and move on to somewhere else. And now the citizenry has sat with an unupdated infrastructure corner for a long time, and that's because business isn't able and shouldn't necessarily be able to foot the bill at the extent that the city or our state governments or county governments are expecting them to. The cities are expected to maintain levels of infrastructure, the counties and states as well, the municipalities. And so when we can't fulfill our basic obligations due to a program like PERS and our $22 billion deficit with that, we have to prioritize that much more than this current legislature and current state administration is doing so. And so that would be a huge place to start with focusing on this issue.
Thank you very much. When I asked for questions last, I had no more hands, no more arms going up. So what I'm going to do right now is draw this to a close. The candidates said they'd be more than happy to stand around and talk with you individually. So I'll give you that opportunity to talk to the candidates by yourselves. And we really appreciate your coming today. And we really appreciate the candidates coming and sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Have a good day.